Good afternoon. I'm Cleone Duncan, and I've had a wonderful ride. And I want to take you chronologically, because it's been a whopper of a life. And I'll try to give you a small feeling of what I've done and what I have lived through. That is a sample, because I wanted you to know what I sounded like, because I don't sing anymore. And I thought, well, maybe you might enjoy hearing a song or two that I used to sing. Okay, now, I was born in Calgary, Alberta. Had a very musical family. My father was a dental surgeon. My mother looked after we kids, and everybody was pretty, shall I say, full of music. And we used to sit around by the hour around the piano and sing, and we loved harmony, so we sang a lot of quartets. And I had two wonderful brothers that loved to sing along with us, and they were also very, very musical. Now, we belonged to the United Church, and I began singing in the Sunday school concerts at age 4. And I didn't shut up from then on. I still haven't shut up. And I sang the concerts. I graduated in singing in the church choir, and weddings and funerals and gatherings of all kinds. And if you're a United Church member, you remember CGIT? Well, I was a member of the CGIT too. But the family was very given to performing. We would perform for each other, and as kids, we used to gather our friends on the street and put on little shows, little reviews in the backyard. As they got a little bit better, we became a little more experienced. We began charging the neighbors for coming to see them, and we would charge a nickel. When we got that money, we were sure we were going to get a lot of popsicles. Anyway, now my first musical was watching Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That was wonderful. I was blown away by the music, and of course I wanted to be Snow White. So when I was, 10 years old, I think, I decided I was going to put on my own version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So I gathered several of my little pupils, or student friends, and we put on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I got an A++ from my music teacher. I was very proud of that. And as high school went on, I did all the plays and the musicals, as you might imagine. And I must bring up one person. There was a teacher, the love of my life, and he was my English and drama teacher in high school. His name was John Laurie. Now, if any of you are familiar with Calgary, you know you've probably traveled on the John Laurie Boulevard that crosses the top of Calgary. That was my teacher, and I loved him. Now, that was an honor that they bestowed upon him because he had been doing a lot of work. He was very involved with the indigenous people. And the Stoney tribe actually adopted him, gave him the name of White Cloud. Now, one of the musicals that we did in my high school days had an indigenous background. It was sort of a legend, and I was to play an Indian princess. Well, John got one of the tribe ladies to let us borrow an authentic buckskin dress. It was beautifully, beautifully decorated with beads and all kinds of things. It was absolutely gorgeous. Well, came time to try it on, and I hefted it, and I thought, I can't lift this, it's heavy. And so they said, oh, we'll help you. So they put it on over my head, and the minute it hit my shoulders, I sank to my knees. I've never felt anything so heavy in my life, at least not until I went to Charlottetown, and that's another story. But that was a lovely experience, and it was a lovely play, and I did manage to finally be able to stand up and carry that dress. It was a trial, but I made it. Okay, moving along. Oh, I became involved in radio by the age of 13 when Jeffrey Waddington, you may remember him from CBC, he was one of their top orchestra leaders. He came to Calgary, and for a whole season, I sang as his soloist. Then, at the age of 10, I got my own show. Now, now I've got to go back here. Yes. No, not 10. I was age 15, and I got my own show, and it ran for 3 years, and it was called Cleone Sings. Now, during this time, World War II began, and I joined an entertainment company that toured all over southern Alberta, visiting the military bases and the POW camps from Lethbridge to Edmonton. Those were great days. They were wonderful audiences. And I have to say, the POWs were wonderful audiences to play for. And I have to give them a great deal of credit for taking it in. They were not always well served, but when they came to see our shows, they had a few happy moments. Now, that was from 1941 to 1945. 45 was a big year for me. Whoops. It was the end of World War II, and in the spring, I was chosen to represent Alberta in the show Singing Stars of Tomorrow on CBC in Toronto. I'd never been to the big city before, and it was quite a trip, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. It was my first experience to be on a big radio show like Singing Stars, and they were so kind to me, and they asked, "Is there anything that you would like to do?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to see the Happy Gang." And that was the biggest thing. You all know the Happy Gang. Yes, well, they were wonderful. I followed them religiously, and that was the big thing of my life in those days, the Happy Gang. Now, also, the end of the war was in 45. I went to Alberta for Singing Stars, and I also, in the fall, I flew to Alberta to study with the noted teacher, Quirino Pellegiotti. Now that's a mouthful, but he was a wonderful teacher. I loved him. He and his wife almost became my surrogate parents, and I studied with him for a number of years and just loved him dearly. With him, I developed a classical repertoire, and I sang roles with the American Opera Company under Maestro Richard Lehr. And I also sang concerts. I loved to do concerts because it gave me a chance to do a variety of songs, not just operatic arias, but lovely art songs. And I sang in about 4 different languages, which pleased me no end. And I also auditioned and was runner-up in the Hollywood Bowl auditions. Now, because of my classical background and repertoire, one of my very favorite numbers that I loved doing when I was doing a concert was a beautiful Italian lullaby. It's called Fiocca la neve. I had to find a job. So I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know what I was equipped for. I'd sung all my life, but I thought, I've dealt with people, so I think I'd be a good receptionist. Well, I did. I got a job in a law office and ended up as one of the junior secretaries. Don't ask why or how, but I did. And also I went on to work in an insurance company. Didn't care much for that. I hadn't been doing anything with my singing. That's what I wanted to make count, was my singing. That's what I loved to do. So I began auditioning and at the different studios in Los Angeles, and I began to get the odd call. And I began working with choral directors such as Jeffrey Alexander at MGM, Charles Henderson at Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, and my favorite, and which I did a lot of work in, was 20th Century Fox, and I became one of the Ken Darby singers. And while I was doing that, Ken suggested that I dub the voice for Rita Moreno in The King and I. Now, I loved that show, and I loved what I did. I was very proud of what I did, but it was not always too happy a situation. I'm human like everyone else, and I had my rise and falls in my career. This happened to be one of them, because after I had sung the song, we had recorded it, and I'd even attended the filming of the scene. And then I was told later that the scene had been cut. My heart was broken. I thought this was my big chance to get into the business, as it were. But went on. I sang more times. I sang with all the studios. I was busy doing my passion, which was singing. Now, I'd like to offer to you now a song from King and I. It's not known by too many people because it's not really what you would call a popular type song, but it's my favorite in the whole show. It was a beautiful score by Rodgers and Hammerstein, and this song is the song that the first wife sings to Anna to explain her relationship with the king, and this was her advice. Something wonderful. And falls, but this is a man who tries. This is a man you'll forgive and forgive and help and protect as long as you live. He will not always say what you three women, and it's pretty hard some days, but you've got to hang on, because they can be wonderful. Oh, 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 sorry. Oh, my words of wisdom, you, never mind. Well, by now, I was hooked on musical theater, not opera. I thought opera was out. It wasn't the life I wanted to lead. I wanted something more earthy. I also liked to dance, and I liked to act. And I didn't like to have just go to the center stage and sing, and then back into the plot again. No, I wanted to do it all. Triple threat. So I went into musical theater. In 1952, I married Paul Howard. Wonderful man, had a gorgeous tenor voice, and we did a lot of shows together. As you can see from the pictures up on the wall, or the board, that was my first husband, and we sang in many shows together, such as Finian's Rainbow, Annie Get Your Gun, and Kismet. And we also worked at the Griffith Theater in Los Angeles, which was a beautiful, beautiful sort of amphitheater with the stage down on the bottom of the hill, and then the, no, thank you, the tiers of seats going up the side of the mountain. And I remember one time, I think we were doing Blossom Time, and we were sitting in a scene of a courtyard, and I turned to my partner and said, "Oh, I see they've put up a brand new lead light up on the hill." He said, "Where?" I said, "Right there at the top of the hill." And he looked at me and he said, "That's not a light, that's a full moon." Those were the days before contact lenses, and I was blind as a bat. So I got over that one. But now I took another turn in my journey, and that was to nightclubs. And I went in 1957 to Las Vegas and sang with the Don Arden Productions. And he always used themes for his productions, and the theme that I came into was the music of Paris. And what did I sing? An operatic aria. I was representing the Paris Opera. So I warbled my way, happily though, through a whole month of grand opera. But then I came back to musical theater. While I was in Las Vegas, though, I had the opportunity to see and meet a number of the stars, because those were the days when all the big musical stars of the studios had their shows in Las Vegas. And we had an opportunity to go and see them on our days off. So I did meet people like Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis, my pet Lena Horne, I loved her, and my teenage idols, Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy. They were about at the end of their careers of performing, but they did put on a couple of wonderful, wonderful performances in Vegas, and I was very fortunate to take those in. And I was thrilled because they were beautiful people, and I had the opportunity to meet and talk with them afterwards, and it was just a joy, an absolute joy. But my biggest and happiest production was the birth of my daughter, Leslie. She came and at the end of the year, on December 23rd, and she was the most beautiful Christmas present I ever had. And she's the joy of my life. It still is. And Oh, by the way, this was at 20th Century Fox, and the name of the film that I was working on that very day was called The Gift of Love, and she was born that night. Oh, and as well you might know, she was surrounded by music all her life. She herself was filled with music, and she became an accomplished composer, lyricist, and writer of music theatre, and is considered now one of Canada's top writers. And I'm very proud of her. She couldn't be here today. She's directing one of her productions at Sheridan College, and she couldn't be here, but she was really disappointed that she was not here. Now, that was back then. And now, in 1960, I returned to Las Vegas. I returned to the Riviera Hotel, and then came back to Los Angeles to work at the famous Coconut Grove in L.A. as the featured singer of the orchestra leader, Gordon Jenkins. If you're familiar with him, he was the orchestra that backed Frank Sinatra on so many occasions. And he was one of the nicest men in the business. My last picture was Music Man at Warner Brothers. And I did that before I returned to Canada. And I returned in June of 1961. Paul was already here. He had come the year before to work in CFTO when it was a brand new station. And he got in on the ground floor and worked with them for many years. I also was fortunate enough to meet a chap called Gino Silvi. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was the head choral director, I guess you'd call him, for CBC. He did all the musical shows with CBC, his singers. And because when I came to Canada, I knew nobody in the business. I'd spent 16 years developing a career in the States, but now I had to start all over again from scratch. But I met Gino, I sang for him, and immediately he asked me, would I come and sing with him? Because I desperately wanted to sing again, I said yes. And the first show I did was Nat King Cole special. Now there was a man I just adored. He was wonderful. He was so kind to everybody, and we just had a ball doing that show. It was, we did it all over Toronto, and over on the island too. And Center Island was one of the big scenes for one of our shows, and we did a lovely moonlight scene around a big bonfire and sitting on the rocks beside the lake. And then a wind came up, and we were sitting in our lovely gowns on these rocks, and the waves coming up and coming up until we were drenched from the waist down. But we kept our smiles, and we kept on singing. But it was fun. It was really fun. I also sang with on the Tommy Hunter show. I guested on that. I was a guest on the Wayne and Schuster show. Sang on the parades with Alan Lund, and we did the Easter shows. One of the people that was on one of those first Easter shows that we did was a teenager, a very talented teenager, called Gordon Lightfoot. He was a delight, and we remained friends for some years, and I've watched his career and have had a sense of great pride in that young man. He's an old man now, but he's still going. I did, also, I was on Great Hymns of All Time at CFTO with the Carl Tapscott Singers. And if you know who they were very popular singing around central and southern Toronto, Ontario. We went on tours also. He took the bunch and we went to the resorts. I can't bring to mind all of the names now, but the lovely summer resorts we would travel to and put on concerts for them. That was a ball, particularly for me because his singers were all gentlemen. And they were gentlemen because I was the only girl, and I gloried in it. Also, I sang Songs of My People with the Ivan Romanoff singers. And we did a lot of shows. Not only I was with him for several seasons on his CBC radio show, but we also went to Ontario Place on numerous occasions and did shows in the big theater there. And one of the shows that I got asked to repeat many times was Porgy and Bess's Summertime by, well, you know, George Gershwin.
The mood, languid and lazy under a sultry sun. The time, any afternoon in summertime.
I love that song. Thank you. Well, it's time that, I did also a number of CBC specials. Lady Emma, that was written for me by Doug Randall, performed in Tom Jones, and Emily Carr by Don Herron and Norman Campbell. You know them. They're the writers of Anne of Green Gables, and I think everybody knows that one. I also went on to do a number of commercials and jingles. These paid the bills. Unfortunately, there was a sad time in my life. My first husband and I divorced in 1963, but we remained good friends. And I think that that was important because of daughter Leslie. So we had a good life, though. I also was on the Juliet show. Do you remember the Juliet?
Yes.
Our pet, Juliet? And she came on right after the hockey game, so nobody could miss her, really. And I was one of the mice, as the quartet of girls, and one of the chaps, the Romeos, and we had a ball on that show. It was one of the most delightful times I ever experienced. It was full of fun, full of good humor, and full of good friends. Still are my good friends. And after Juliet's show closed, her TV show closed, she had a wonderful noontime radio show, and she had me guest on that for many, many years. I also, in 1968, had my own show for CBC called This is Cleone. That's what most of these tapes are from, the numbers that I sang at numerous times on that show, because I don't sing anymore. In 1969, I married Don Parrish. If you know the name, he was host of Candlelight and Wine over CFTO. He was the first news anchor for the new national CTV. And his radio show, Candlelight and Wine, he hosted for 25 years. And we lived in Don Mills for quite a while. While there, I joined the Charlottetown Festival in 1969 with Alan Lund. Now you may be wondering, well, who's he? If you think back, you probably all know him because Alan and Blanche Lund were the dancing darlings of CBC and of Canada. They were famous. He has his name on our Walk of Fame. He was honored by the Prime Minister and got an Order of Canada. He was a remarkable, remarkable man. And I enjoyed 15 seasons in the Charlottetown Festival. And of course, that included Anne of Green Gables. And to me, that was one of the loveliest, most beautiful musicals written. And Don Heron and Norman Campbell were the writers of that show. Both of them became very close, very dear friends. And let me see. Oh yes, we represented Canada and took Anne over to Expo 70 in Osaka, Japan. And I was fortunate enough that I could take Leslie with me. So we had a wonderful 3 weeks over there. Then we built our home, our country home, north of Bowmanville in 1981. Unfortunately, Don had a series of strokes in 85 and returned to Toronto in 89 and bought our home in North York. Don passed away in 1996. I would like to do one little deviation here that I don't think we were waiting. I think I surprised Marissa with it. You've been hearing a soprano all afternoon, and Don had the most amazing bass voice that you will ever hear. And I want to give you a small sampling of that. So you'll get the high, and now you'll get the low. what I thrilled at every time he opened his mouth. He was also a great speaker. He was head of our actors union for 7 or 8 years. It took us through many trials and tribulations and won out in the end. But I just figured I needed to show this to you. It was such a big part of my life, that man. Thank you. Now, on the way through this journey, I've dropped a few names, simply not just to impress you, but to let you know who I mingled with at times. But now I've got to give you the cream of the crop, my biggest delights, my biggest thrills. And that was, I met while I was in Charlottetown Festival and working with them. We performed for and met Queen Elizabeth and Philip, Prince Philip, Prince Andrew, and Fergie when they were together. And I also was able to share a lovely glass of wine with Pierre Trudeau. So, my claim to fame. So along with all of this, I also taught singing for over 25 years. I retired in 2000 after 2 knee replacements, and my dancing days were over. Well, slowed down. I moved to Kingsmere last October and really enjoy my life here. Everyone is so openly acceptant and friendly, and I was overwhelmed when I was given the honor by 3 of my brightest lights, Marissa, Lisa, and Lorena May. And they, when they had been talking to me early on in my coming here, I guess you'd say, I had discussed a few of these things, and they said, well, do you have any regrets? And I said, no, no, no. Oh, well, maybe one. In all the time that I worked, and all the places that I sang, and the people I sang with, I never had my name up in lights. Well, you must know what happened. These girls, under Marissa's guiding hand, overwhelmed me. They secretly drove me into town, placed me under the marquee, and said, okay, look up. And that's when I saw my name in lights. Oh, I've got goose pimples right now remembering that evening. I think that was one of the most beautiful, beautiful things anyone has ever done for me. I'll never, ever forget that. I was thrilled. I'm still thrilled. And I still get goosebumps every time I look at that picture. Okay? Now, you may ask, okay, what's your legacy? My legacy is my beautiful, amazing daughter, Leslie, my many wonderful students who had and still enjoy successful music careers, loving family, friends, and people with whom my life has touched and brought some measure of happiness from the connection. And with that, that's the end of my road, the end of my journey, and I thank you so much for your patience. It's been a long, long time since I've done a performance. And I'd like to leave you now with what I considered my party piece, Velia from the Merry Widow. Thank you very much.
There once was Ophelia, a